Let's continue with the ideas of classifying the rules for sustaining the commons, and of course we have to know how many types of rules there are, which we approximately did in the figure here. We use the action situation to classify 7 broad types of rules: position, boundary, choice, aggregation, information, payoff, and scope, which we already described here. Position rules create positions, for example, member of a legislature or a committee, voter, etc. Boundary rules affect how individuals are assigned to or leave positions and how one situation is linked to other situations. Again, these are all intuitive, just we are putting a formal foundation for them. Choice rules affect the assignment of particular action to choice rules affect the assignment of particular action sets to positions. Aggregation rules affect the level of control that individual participants exercise at a linkage within or across situations. Okay. So aggregation rules basically determine the overall outcome and tend to focus on potential outcomes, and as we mentioned before, what role each employer may play in a particular firm and what the expected outcome of the whole firm is, so that you cannot completely act on your own without keeping in mind what the outcome is, right? Information rules affect the level of information available in a situation about possible actions and the link between actions and outcomes. So the information you have will be different from what information your boss has, or your boss's boss has, or the CEO of your organization, or the director of your institute has, and so on. Payoff rules affect the benefits and costs assigned to outcomes given the actions chosen. Scope rules affect which outcomes must not, or may be affected within a given domain. Right? So everybody has to keep in mind the outcomes. So director of the institute is as important to keeping the outcome in mind as any other employee, even though the information and the roles they play, the positions they occupy, are very different. So everybody is aggregating towards the scope of the outcome, right? So let's look at the aim component of each type of rule. We're just adding tiny bit of details on the semantics of what we are saying. So let's put these 7 again together. Type of rule, basic aim, verb. How is it that your rule defines your action? So verb is the action, right? Regulated component of the action situation, because everything has to fit in the action situation and be linked to outcomes and meet the scope of the outcome that is defined by someone, let's say. So position is to be. So those are the regulated component of the action situations, are all the positions, whether it's in a game or in a school or in the institute as a whole, and so on. Boundary, so you enter or leave through the boundary. So participants in this case could be spectators, could be customers, could be vendors, suppliers, employees, and so on. Choice, aim is to do. Basic verb is action, do. So that's of course actions. Aggregation, so jointly affecting, and the regulated component is the overall control rule. Information, you send it or receive it based on the position, and that's your verb. And of course the component here is information itself. Payoff, so pay or receive, so that affects costs and benefits, and the scope is to occur. The outcome has to occur, and the component of course is outcomes. Sounds bizarre, but it's the pedagogical formal framework for IAD. So specific rules can have an impact on the whole action situation. Take for example the local medallion ordinance for taxis in urban areas. A boundary rule might be that only taxis who display a purchased medallion from the city can legally use the city streets to attract customers. This was the pre ride hailing systems like Uber and Ola, but even Uber and Ola carry some label on them, not necessarily always. This has been the case in New York City for decades. Sorry about that. My allergy is almost gone, but the throat acts up once in a while. When a city limits the number of medallions it will authorize, the entry costs for putting a taxi on the streets rise substantially if demand is rising. So you pay a certain amount for the medallion to get permission to be a taxi, and then you have to make that money back. So if demand goes up, more requests for medallions will come in. But if the medallions are strictly limited, the potential returns per unit of time also increases substantially, but the time traveler has to wait for a taxi may also increase. Because there are limited number of medallions running around, there are too many people looking for a taxi, and this used to happen around 2000. It can still happen for Ola and Uber as well, right? Around 2000, the Dutch government changed the boundary rules for taxis in the Netherlands. Until that time, there were strict boundary rules for cities. If you had a medallion for a particular city and you couldn't go out, the Minister of Economic Affairs argued that it would be more efficient to open the market and let taxis freely attract passengers within the whole country. So you got a medallion that was valid anywhere. It was expected that competition between taxis would increase performance and reduce prices, so that taxis would be available across the country and at optimum price for everybody. However, taxis flocked to Amsterdam, the city with the most potential clients, and the original taxi company acted to defend their territory. So people who were originally running the taxis in Amsterdam tried to fight this system. The so-called taxi war led to taxi drivers fighting physically for passengers, and some taxis were burned in the process because the fight for money and survival got fairly strong. Further, many taxi drivers without much knowledge of Amsterdam city streets ended up driving tourists who also did not know their way around. So obviously can cause cheating and other problems. After 10 years, the government concluded that the policy change, boundary rule change, essentially led to higher prices and reduced the quality of taxi service. Could the government have used a policy analysis framework like the institutional analysis and development to foresee this unintended consequence? So when you make a policy change, boundary rule change, or participant rule change and so on, can you do the analysis first before implementing them blindly? That's the very goal of things like IAD, which we looked at before, right? So let me leave this short podcast here, and then we will come back and look at the 7 types of rules in details. This one is fairly short, only 9 minutes, but that's okay.